Well, hey guys, welcome to the Reach Right podcast, episode number 9. I am your host, Thomas Costello, and my co-host today, as he is always, it is...
Ian Hyatt here in the flesh.
Hey Ian, thanks for being here today. Closed on your house today, I hear, is that right?
I'm here even though we have done that and gone through a long real estate process, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. But yes, we're here and very excited and thankful.
Yeah, that is good. That is good. We're happy about that and excited to see your new studio come behind you here.
Well, you know,
for those that watch.
It's getting there, yeah. For those that watched last week, slightly chopped off face and nothing in the background but boxes, and maybe if someone spotted that. So we're getting there.
That's it. Well, we got a good topic today we get to share with people. I know you and I have kind of dialogued about it a little bit, but we're going to unpack it some. It's the 5 biggest objections to the Google grant for churches. The 5 biggest objections. Why don't you tell us a little bit, just for those that maybe don't know about the Google grant for churches, what is that and what do churches get? What's that about?
Yeah, so for churches and nonprofits, Google gives literally up to $10,000 a month in AdWords marketing dollars. So it's in the form of AdWords. So Google AdWords, for those that are familiar with that, online ads for your organization. But they do. If you're a 501c3, you will qualify for it, and it is a real thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So does that mean like Google just sends you a check for $10,000 every single month? Is that what that is? We get that, don't we? Don't we get that question sometimes?
I hear that probably every other day.
Yeah.
And that would be lovely. That would be super generous of Google, even though this grant is very generous. It's not that generous. So no, not cutting you a check for $10,000. If so, I'd be like, yeah, that's why we just got this new house. No, I'm kidding. So.
Yeah, the grant is for in-kind AdWords, basically. So they give you $10,000 free to spend on their platform for the search network AdWords, basically. So Google has so many different advertising channels in 2020 that it includes YouTube ads and their display network, which is, you ever notice where you've been searching for something and then you start to see ads for that company on other websites and that kind of stuff? That's their display network out there. This is for search ads. So when someone types a search into a search box that Google runs, it's usually those first 3 or so results that come up there. Those are ads that companies usually pay for, but for nonprofits, Google gives it to them for free, $10,000 a month at least for free. Yeah. So we think that every single church should take advantage of this. Every church probably should be set up as a nonprofit. If they don't have their own 501c3, they should probably have one through their parent organization so that they can process donations efficiently for givers. But we think that if your church is in that category, every single church should be doing their very best to take advantage of every cent of this $10,000 that they possibly can. But we tend to hear some objections about this. There's some reasons why people think that maybe they shouldn't. And we wanted to do our best to answer some of those today as to why we think even in that case, you probably should apply for, get, and use the Google grant. Maybe you can share with us, Ian, some of those that you hear most. You're the one talking directly to clients the most. So what do you hear?
Yeah, no, it's good. And it's good that we start with this first point after kind of just, giving a little summary of what the Google grant is, because one of the first things that might come to mind when someone hears that big number is that this is too good to be true. Yeah, I think we hear that I hear that pretty often. And I think because of that big $10,000 number, or this, because it is Google, which is obviously Google's monopolized search engine, search engines and everything. So everyone's like, there's got to be some sort of a catch.
Right. Yeah, and I guess that there is, there's not a catch. I mean, I wouldn't say there's a catch. I don't think that Google's motives are completely altruistic. It's not that they had an evangelical revival happening at Google, so they're trying to help more churches do this. So I don't be tricked into thinking that's the reason why they're doing that. There's a few reasons why. I think number one, I think it's that they there's some street cred that they get by helping nonprofits, and so they want to have some kind of a generosity wing, which I think is important for their overall brand. I think originally their company slogan was "Don't be evil." That was kind of their main mission statement, was to not be evil, and so helping nonprofits was something that was in their wheelhouse, they felt like. But I think there's financial incentive for them too, just so we don't need to get too deep into the details of exactly how it works. But the way that Google Ads works is that it's a auction structure. So companies that want to place ads on Google Search Network, they basically have a bidding strategy where they say, I will pay up to X amount for every click that I get onto my ads. And then another company will say, well, I'll pay $5 for every single click. And then another company will say, I'll pay $5.11. And so they kind of have this competing structure that what this does, the Google grant, because we don't actually pay for these, but what it does is it helps to drive up the cost of other ads that are being placed on the Google Search Network. So every time a church puts an ad out there, you got to remember, we're not just competing with other churches out there. And I don't really think when I say competing, I mean that very loosely. Right. I think in a search engine platform sense, we are competing. We're all on the same team in the end. We're trying to reach people for Jesus. But what this does is we're competing not just with other churches for people's eyes, but we're competing with movies, or maybe just things that people want to do. Like I know one of the big ways that we did search engine ads for the church that I pastored is we tried to target people looking for things to do in Madison, Wisconsin. And we were competing against farmers markets and movies and events. Those are things we're competing. And so when we do it this way, what it does is Google's free money, actually, it helps to keep the price of what other companies, what for-profit companies are paying. It kind of keeps it inflated. So you can think what you will about that. But I want to make sure everybody knows that we're not under this false pretense that we think that Google has somehow just come to their senses and wanted to be a blessing to churches. It's not completely that way. But we do think that there is some real reason for it. And it really isn't too good to be true, because we know this because we have lots and lots of people that we help do it. I think I just saw our number is that this year we crossed $1.8 million of Google's money that we helped churches spend so far. So it's pretty crazy when you think about it that way, right?
That is a lot of money, it is.
$1.8 million that churches could have paid for but didn't because it was from the grant there. So if you're thinking it's too good to be true, you're not alone, but it really isn't. It is something that we see churches taking advantage of all the time.
And one thing you just mentioned too, I'll expound upon a little bit at the beginning, is that it is part of Google's brand, and when they see numbers like you just mentioned, and they see even bigger numbers, I'm sure, of how much of it the grant has been used everywhere. To them, they can point and say, this is how much we've given back, and I remember actually one of our employees at Reach Right, because we do interact with Google, even though we're a separate company, for support reasons for our clients. We had a couple of clients that were concerned, hey, is this grant going to go away? And I know Thomas used it over 5 years ago for your church, like you just indicated. And so it's been around for a while, and we don't see it going away. When one of our employees was having that conversation with a Google rep, they actually their voice raised in a positive way, and they're like, no, we love it. This is a part of our brand and our identity as a company. And it's basically here to stay is what they were communicating.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you're exactly right with that. So why don't you hit number 2 for us?
Yeah, number 2 is the non-discrimination clause that Google has, and that's something that when you're applying for the grant, you see front face right away, and so that has been an obstacle for some evangelical churches for sure.
Yeah, I think so. There's only one part of that non-discrimination clause that people have an issue with. And clarify. So it's, I don't think people have, basically what it says is that your organization, you commit to not discriminating in your practices or hiring practices even on the basis of gender, So, I think most churches are okay with that. They hire men and women both. Some churches have a challenge with some of that stuff around the lead pastor role and those kinds of things, but we can talk about that a little bit. Race, I think if your church has a problem with that, we probably don't want to work with you anyway if you're discriminating based on race. So you got bigger fish to fry. There's some other, I guess, it talks about religion in there a little bit, but I think that there's an obvious exception for churches with that thing. But the big one, I think, for most churches is the clause in there about not discriminating on the basis of sexual orientation. Right. And I think every church processes this differently. And I think I want to share with you, as an evangelical pastor who has always held to and taught from the pulpit that our belief that marriage is between one man and one woman, and that's the way the Bible ordains it, and that's what we believe in. I want to share with you a little bit about why I still feel okay signing on to that non-discrimination clause. It's because the term that they use at Google is based on sexual orientation. And the church that I pastored, I was always very clear to teach about this, is that we are not there to fight this battle over orientation and what that means. There is a difference between sexual orientation and sexual practice. And at every church I've ever pastored, we have always been clear that, I don't know if I'd use the word discriminate, but we have very strong opinions on sexual practice of all kinds. So we don't believe that sex should be something that people partake in outside of the confines of a male-female marriage. That's something that we believe. But that is a practice question. But we have also always stood with people that feel like that maybe while they're not practicing that, their orientation is something that's totally different there. Right. So we've had people in the church that I pastored that one gentleman in particular, he shared with me that he had a gay orientation, but he wasn't practicing that way, where he felt like he was attracted to men, but he wasn't ever going to practice those things. And so we celebrated that. I mean, that's cause to celebrate. If someone, I don't wish that on somebody, but I think that that's something that when people get to that place where they have lived in a certain lifestyle and they decide that they're no longer going to practice that, that's something to celebrate. So orientation is different from practice. And in my view, I think that I can sign off on a non-discrimination clause that singles out orientation, as long as it doesn't single out sexual practice, which is where I think most churches they kind of fall on that line there. And I think most evangelical churches are the same as that. I believe your church is probably, would you say you guys are the same way, Ian?
Same way, definitely.
Yeah. Anything to add to that?
No, I think too, it's one thing to note is that it's not something that, to our understanding, Google is not sending secret shoppers into your church or anything like that. So I don't think that should be a concern. I don't think it's been anything heavily policed or anything. It is a grant, and that's just their stance on it. But no, I think you hit the nail on the head with that, Thomas. I think that's a good way to look at it. Every church should be open to reaching any individual, and of course the goal is, when they get there, is to turn that person into a Christ follower that turns away from that particular sin as well as others. And so I think that if we don't, as long as we keep our mission in front of us, I think that most evangelical pastors are okay with that. So
and I think again we discriminate on all kinds of sexual practices, right? So we wouldn't hire someone who was a man living with his girlfriend. We wouldn't hire someone who was
bestiality or whatever. Or,
not to get off on. There's all kinds of practices and I don't want to make any comparisons to one practice to another or anything like that. But what we're getting at is that I think that there should be some freedom. And I think it's important that pastors are able, to me, it was important to answer this question with integrity and honesty when they asked me that I could say with good conscience that I'm not going to take this and not abide by what they say, or basically say that I'm something that I'm not. Because I can say that I really do feel like, on the basis of orientation, I want to celebrate with those that are making that kind of a sexual practice decision in their lives. Yeah. So that's kind of my thought on it. And so hopefully that's helpful to churches. What else do we have? What other questions or objections do we get?
Yeah, the next one would be political concerns with the grant.
Yeah.
So that, and of course, in this climate we're in right now, I
Oh my
think that's
goodness.
top of mind for a lot of pastors and ministry leaders and alike. So yeah, that's one we I think don't hear of as much as some of the others, but it's out there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that with yeah, I hear it quite a bit on our Facebook advertising when we put ads out on Facebook, which is where all the best political arguments happen, is on
goodness.
Facebook, right? The most best way to change someone's mind is to write to companies about your political beliefs about their ads. So, but it's we do see this quite a bit. I'd say just that people say that it's if you sign on to this, that there is a catch, and that catch is that you have to basically bow down to Google's political agenda,
Right.
whether that be their silencing of conservative voices, or it be their relationship with other governments that are maybe hostile to us, or their promotion of election meddling from Russia, and all these kinds of things. You hear all kinds of stuff problems that people have with Google. I'll just say that that's something that most churches probably have to weigh, and I don't see any direct connection between a church using the Google grant, using the free money that... Now, it's one thing, if you have a conviction about giving money to Google, and you're maybe in a place where you want to boycott that, I get that. I think if you want to be careful and not spend $1,000 a month on advertising with Google because of their political leanings, God bless you. More power to you with those kinds of things. And if that's your conviction, that's great. This is something that's different, I think, because really you're taking money from Google.
Yeah.
And sure, they have something to gain from it. I'm sure there's something deep down in there. But I will say that I don't think that this should fall under a general political boycott if you're someone that's doing that. And I'm not advocating that or saying that I do. But if you are of that leaning, I don't think that receiving grant money should fall into that category. What do you think?
No, I totally agree. And if someone has that kind of conviction against supporting Google, they can look at it as, hey, you know what? I'll take your free money then, and I'll lead more people to Jesus. And
taking what the enemy meant for harm and turning it to good, right?
It's
kind of a Joseph story there.
It can be for sure.
A modern day Joseph. There you go. Be one of those, Pastor.
Yeah, that's it. So I think that's something that some people, as the Southern saying goes, people make a mountain out of a molehill. So
there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it. So, all right, hit the next one. Let's get out of the political and sexual orientation stuff and get into something a little bit more mainstream.
Yeah, something I hear often is, we're just we're in a small town, we're not, big metropolitan area, and there are not that many people doing searches out here, and we're one of maybe, only 10 churches in the county or whatever, and I just don't think it'll benefit us because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one, and I get where people are coming from with this, and there is a nugget of truth to what they're saying. I think that the task of getting eyes on your ads from Google that are free in a small town is harder than it is in a big city. Right. Because there's just a lot more people to reach out to in a big city than there are in a small town. And when you have $10,000 to spend every single month, it's hard to find that many eyeballs sometimes in smaller towns. Right. So if you are in rural Montana, your results from the Google grant will probably be different from a church that's in Los Angeles or New York City, right? So, and that being said, I think that there's a few ways around this. And let me explain the reason why. So most churches, when they run the Google grant, they're doing it with a regional target. So for most churches, this is kind of changing with coronavirus and us going online so much more as churches. But usually we were trying to reach people that were in driving distance to the church. So depending on where you are, some places in rural Montana, people will drive 40 miles to church. That's not uncommon. In places like New York City, going more than 5 blocks to your church might seem like it's too far to go, right? So regional is really different from place to place. But the number of people in 5 blocks of New York City, in like 5 blocks in Manhattan, it might be much larger than within 50 miles of rural Montana. So, in New York City, for instance, though, you can reach within a 40 or 50 mile radius, you can reach tens of millions of people right around there that possibly could come into church. Whereas you're only talking in some rural parts of the country, you're talking about maybe 50,000 people or 10,000 people within a 40 or 50 mile radius. And so you have a much smaller range. So here's the thing. Number one, I think you can broaden your reach beyond just your driving range, especially if churches are going more and more digital now. You're putting your services online. I know in some rural places, there are very successful online services and online churches that do kind of an online service with chats and those things that are reaching the entire state of Montana, or reaching the entire country, really, in some ways. So you can broaden your reach and not just target that. You could put things on your website that are useful, not just to people that are in your community there, but are broader than that. The gospel is valuable to everybody. So that's one thing. And then I think you have to have a different expectation on results if you are trying to just target locally. Now, here's the thing to remember is that if you only spend $2,000 of Google's money, that's still $2,000 more than you had before. So you didn't max out the entire $10,000 because you're not in a big city. That's still $2,000 of free advertising.
And about 800 different clicks or some odd around that ballpark. Yeah.
Exactly.
People clicking onto your ad. Yeah.
Exactly right. I'm in Hawaii, and Hawaii is a notoriously hard place to do the Google grant because, well, I'm in a big city of about 700,000 people here in Honolulu. There's only 1 million people on our island here. And by Google grant standards, within a large radius, there's only that many people here. Now, we do have some successful clients here in Hawaii that are doing very well. Some of them have broadened out and have started delivering their messages to people in California and other places there. So there's some strategy with that. But yeah, I'd say, again, it's all free money. So whether you spend all 10,000 or 2,000, I think it's something that churches should claim either way.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's the way to look at this is, even if you reached, a couple more people and that person made a decision to follow Jesus, isn't that a victory? At the end of the day, even if it was one, right? That's what we always have said, not just with the Google grant, but any ministry effort. Even if one person came to know the Lord, it's the whole ministry effort was worthwhile. And I think that's a good mindset to have. I think but most rural places will still reach more than just one,
I
person.
hope so.
Oh yeah, I mean, it reminded me, Thomas, of a story I heard from one of the pastors that we serve, and they were running the grant. They were able to reach a guy that was, he was definitely not in their same city. He was in their same state, but this guy did a Google search and found them, went online, listened to this pastor's message or a couple of messages, gave his life to the Lord, ended up reaching out to the church to let them know, hey, I'm not going to be able to make a drive there, but I follow you guys online, and I really feel like I'm a part of the ministry. And the neat thing is they made that connection from this, and that church was able to follow up and send him like a neat care package and some branded stuff that made him feel like a member and valued as a member. So that's the value of it too. Even if you're in a smaller rural area, something like that is an amazing story.
That's so awesome. I hadn't heard that yet. That's really a cool story to hear that it's working for people. So yeah, if it doesn't cost you anything, I think, it's okay to do it for one person. I think that there's a lot more than one person you can reach with this. So it's a good idea. So why don't you tackle our last one? What's the last objection that we hear?
Yeah, I guess is, when someone is not wanting to consider outside help or professional help with the grant, is, can I just do this myself? Can I just get the Google grant and run with it myself? And so I think it's a good one to end on, because this is kind of, once someone realizes the value of the grant, it's a good question to have. Someone should, ask themselves, is this something that I can manage myself?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, let me say this here. So we help churches with this grant service. We help churches run their Google grant if they can't do it on their own. There's lots of other companies that, not a ton that do it for churches specifically or nonprofits, but there's lots of people that help manage AdWords campaigns for a paid type deal. I just want this to be a help to anybody. I want this podcast not just to be for people that are using our service or thinking about it, but just anybody out there. I think that the answer to that is yes. You can do the grant yourself if you are willing to, you already know how, or you're willing to learn how to run Google AdWord campaigns and invest the time to do it. And I will say as a disclaimer that it is pretty hard to do. That I can tell you that personally, I've been in the web industry since 2007. You and I have been working at this for a long time. When we first caught wind of the Google grant, when I was pastoring a church and I wanted to give it a try, our first client at ReachRight was the church that I pastored, so we could kind of test this and make sure that it worked. But I figured that, hey, I'd give it a try. Maybe I could learn it, and I couldn't. I tried to spend the $10,000 that Google gave me, and I was able to spend, I think, like $25 a month is how much I was able to get based on my own thing. So
it's almost a waste.
I know, and I took a look at, do I want to spend the time, go through like a certification process? You don't have to do that, but you might want to go through a Google certification process, which is a pretty intensive program to learn how to run AdWords programs and really learn the nuts and bolts of this. Or does it make sense to trust a professional out there? And that's what I decided to do. So I hired one of these guys that does business grants, business AdWords. So they'll run AdWords campaigns for businesses. The going rate for that is like 20% of whatever the AdWords spend is. So if you were going to spend $10,000, you would spend an additional $2,000 in having someone manage it for you. So that was kind of the going rate. We don't charge anywhere near that at ReachRight, but that's what the going rate is out there. So I hired somebody to try to help us manage this. And the results just went through the roof. So we weren't able to spend quite the entire $10,000, but the little church that I was pastoring wound up being the most viewed website in the entire city of Madison, Wisconsin, because we were using the Google grant to its full extent with someone that knew what they were doing. So on top of that, I think what you find is that there's so much trial and error in doing a grant campaign or any kind of AdWords campaign, is that you almost never stick it on the first try. You'll try different things and you'll find that, hey, this gets a lot of clicks, but people aren't showing up to services from it. This one, it gets some clicks, but they don't stay on the website very long, so that's not very good. This one, we can't get any clicks with it. And so I can't tell you how many different sets of keywords and ads that we've tried over the years that we've just thrown them away. We don't use them anymore, and we've settled on still, a few thousand different keywords, several dozen ads that seem to get the best results for churches. And so there has been tons and tons of trial and error that's gone on for years that lets us hone in on what's working when someone creates one of these Google grant campaigns. So all that to say, the objection to the idea that I'll try it myself, we are all for that. If you want to get in there and learn how to do it, and you have the time, maybe in this coronavirus lockdown season, you're ready to go get the training that Google offers you, or you can do a paid course in how to do AdWords advertising. Great. I'm all for that. I just think that the vast majority of pastors and churches, they probably don't have the time, the talent, or just the desire to get into this deep into this kind of a thing. And you might be better off having somebody else do it that has a lot of experience within that. What do you think?
No, that's it exactly. And I mean, again, more power to you if you can do it. And maybe you're at your church, you do have a Google AdWords expert there already, or maybe you have like a younger college intern person that would put in the work to get certified and do all of that and spend all the time. Again, we see that that's pretty rare. And even if someone does get a jump on it, unfortunately, I've often heard, because one thing to note with this too is that if the grant is not actively being managed by someone, and Google, by the way, they're always changing stuff on the back end and which keywords are effective and can be used and all of that stuff. So if that's not being monitored and it's not being managed regularly, they actually suspend your grant. So we've heard that. I've heard that so many times. So that's the thing, is if you do have the person with the time and the talent, make sure they're going to be there to stick it out for the long haul.
even our pro staff team that does that, I mean, we get notifications all the time that say, hey, this account's in danger of being suspended unless you make these kinds of changes. And so it's a constant process. So don't, I think that, make sure you count the cost, as we're told in Scripture. Count the cost before you sign on to do something like that. I mean, you know, if you lose it, you didn't lose any money, I guess. But I think it's something that you should really think about. And I think for most churches, it probably makes sense, in order to get $10,000 of free advertising, to spend a little bit of money to make sure you're able to maximize something like that. It's probably a good investment. I know for my church it made a huge difference, even when before we started and built a team around this that actually manages it for churches. So it's been a really good thing there. So good. Anything else to add, Ian? Any other objections or anything else to chime in with?
No objections. I think it was good. I think we've covered all of that, and kind of shorter and sweeter this podcast, but we thought hopefully it packed a punch for our followers. So
that's it. We'll have some, if you're watching this or you're listening, you can check out our website, or if you're watching this, you can see in the description below, we'll put some links to some more information on the Google Grant, including a place where you can check your eligibility to see if you're doing that. We want to be a resource to churches, so even if you just have a question on it, you can check your eligibility there, or you can shoot us a message. We're happy to answer any questions if you need some direction on this, whether we help you or not. Just we want to be a resource to help churches take advantage of this any way that we can. One last thing before we go. If you have enjoyed these podcasts, you like it, it's been helpful to you, please do share, like, rate, review, subscribe, do all those kinds of things. It helps us get up there in the rankings, and more people get to listen and watch this podcast. So we appreciate you guys, and thanks for all the feedback we've been getting on this here too. So thanks for listening this week, and we'll catch you guys next time.
See you guys.